The recording begins with a whisper, so faint that investigators would later enhance the audio just to understand what was said. "They're walking again." The voice belonged to Marcus Webb, a night security guard working alone in a nearly abandoned building. The dispatcher asked a simple question: "Who's walking?" The answer never came. Instead, a sound emerged from somewhere beyond the phone. A footstep, heavy, deliberate, then another, slowly moving through a hallway that should have been empty. Marcus fell silent, listening, waiting. As the footsteps drew closer, the dispatcher kept talking, demanding to know what was happening. Marcus never replied. Seconds later, the footsteps stopped. The line remained open. No voices, no movement, only a suffocating silence. Then the call disconnected. By sunrise, Marcus Webb had vanished. What remained of him was discovered 3 days later, wedged inside a ventilation shaft on the 4th floor. Or rather, what the coroner could piece together of him. The parts that still had a shape. No sign of an intruder. No sign of an escape. No explanation for what had reduced a grown man to something investigators refused to photograph twice. What happened inside that building remains unexplained. Because the most disturbing part of the investigation wasn't what was left of the guard. It was what investigators discovered when they reviewed the security footage from that night. The cameras had captured something walking the hallway beside him, step for step, for 22 minutes. Before the footage cut to static. The investigation began 3 weeks after Marcus Webb was found. At the center of it was documentary filmmaker Daniel Hart. For years, Daniel had built a reputation exploring abandoned factories, forgotten prisons, and decaying institutions that most people preferred to avoid. His films focused on facts, not ghost stories. That changed when a package arrived at his office with no return address. Inside were 3 items: a bundle of old cassette recordings, a faded floor plan, and a yellowed newspaper clipping. The headline immediately caught his attention. "Hospital wing permanently closed after midnight incident, 7 staff unaccounted for." The article offered almost no details, no description of what had happened. No names beyond the count of the missing. No explanation for why an entire section of the hospital had been sealed and the concrete poured. It simply stated that the wing would never reopen. Folded beneath the clipping was a handwritten note. Only 5 words. "If you hear footsteps, don't count them." Daniel assembled a crew. For people he trusted completely. Maya Chun, his lead camera operator, who had filmed in war zones and claimed nothing frightened her anymore. Rick Okafor, audio engineer, 12 years in the field, built like a man who enjoyed trouble. Priya Nair, researcher and archivist, the one who had originally flagged the building's history. And James Whitfield, a former paramedic who doubled as the team's safety officer and medic. None of them had seen the coroner photographs from Marcus Webb's case. Daniel made sure of that. He told himself it was to preserve objectivity. He knew, even then, it was because the photographs would have ended the project before it started. While studying the floor plan, Daniel noticed something unusual. One corridor had been marked with thick red lines, crossed out so aggressively that parts of the blueprint beneath were almost impossible to read. There were no labels, no warning, no explanation, just a hallway that someone had deliberately erased. Curious, Priya searched through archived records, construction permits, and historical maps of the property. Every version showed the same thing. The hallway existed in older blueprints, then suddenly disappeared, as if someone wanted it forgotten. Not closed, not renovated, forgotten. The deeper they looked, the stranger the silence became. Because records can be altered, reports can be destroyed, but removing an entire hallway from every blueprint requires effort. It requires intention. Someone had gone to great lengths to make sure people stopped asking about that corridor. The question was why. And as the team prepared to travel to the abandoned hospital, another question began to emerge. If the hallway no longer existed, then who was still walking through it? The crew arrived at the hospital shortly before sunset. The building stood alone in the middle of miles of empty countryside. No nearby houses, no traffic, no signs of life, just a massive structure rotting in silence. Its upper windows stared out across the fields like rows of black, hollow sockets. Most of the hospital had been consumed by decades of neglect. Paint hung from the walls in long strips. Sections of the roof had collapsed inward. Entire wings disappeared beneath vines and dead vegetation. Yet one detail immediately bothered Daniel. The main entrance was unlocked. Not broken, not forced open, unlocked, as though someone had left it that way, waiting. "That's not a good sign," Maya said, adjusting the camera on her shoulder. Nobody argued. They entered carrying cameras, audio recorders, spare batteries, and enough equipment to document every room in the building. Rick moved ahead, positioning microphones along the ground floor corridors. Priya stayed close to Daniel, cross-referencing the floor plan with the actual layout. James swept each room before the others entered. Old habit. At first, the hospital felt exactly like every abandoned building they had explored before. Wind slipped through shattered windows. Loose doors shifted on rusted hinges. Somewhere below, water dripped steadily into darkness. The sounds were familiar, predictable, the kind of noises that could explain away almost any ghost story. Then midnight arrived, and a single footstep echoed through the hospital. Maya stopped filming. The sound was distant, heavy. A few seconds later, another footstep followed. Then another, slow, measured, deliberate. The footsteps continued at a pace so precise it sounded unnatural, like a metronome hidden somewhere inside the building. "Animal," Rick offered. Nobody answered. Animals didn't walk like that. The rhythm never changed. Every step landed after exactly the same interval. No hesitation, no variation, no sign of fatigue, just endless walking. Daniel grabbed a flashlight and followed the sound down the nearest corridor. The footsteps continued. He entered another hallway, still the same distance away. He walked faster. Nothing changed. He broke into a jog. The crew followed, spread across 2 hallways, attempting to triangulate the source. The sound remained unchanged, as though distance meant nothing. Daniel stopped moving entirely. The footsteps continued. 1, 2, 3, always the same. A later analysis of the audio revealed something investigators could never explain. No matter where the team traveled inside the hospital, the footsteps remained at a constant volume. Not louder, not quieter, exactly the same. It was as if the sound existed outside the building's physical space. Not coming from a location, but from something attached to them, following them, watching them, room after room, floor after floor. Then Daniel's flashlight swept across a corridor coated in decades of dust. He froze. Fresh footprints stretched across the floor. Bare human footprints, perfectly clear, as though someone had walked there moments earlier. The dust surrounding them remained untouched. No drag marks, no disturbances, just footprints. Daniel aimed his camera forward. There was nobody in the hallway. Yet as he watched, another footprint appeared directly in front of him. The dust compressed by an invisible weight. A heel formed first, then the arch, then the toes, as though an unseen foot had pressed itself into the floor. "What the—" Priya backed against the wall. Rick kept his microphone pointed forward. His hands were shaking. Daniel followed the trail, turned a corner. The invisible walker continued ahead. Then everything stopped. Instantly, the footsteps vanished. The corridor fell silent. The final footprint rested several feet ahead. Only half of it existed. The heel was visible, part of the arch, but the front half never formed. The impression ended abruptly, as though whatever had stepped there ceased to exist before completing the motion. While examining the area, Daniel noticed a clock hanging crookedly on the wall, hands frozen at 12:07. Then another clock appeared around the corner, also stopped at 12:07. Then another, and another. Every clock in the building displayed the exact same time, 12:07. Not approximately, exactly, as though every clock in the hospital had witnessed the same event, and died at the same second. Unable to shake what they had witnessed, the crew returned to the administrative wing they had chosen as a base. The footsteps were gone. The hospital had become silent again, almost peaceful. James distributed water from his pack. His hands were not entirely steady. "I want to go on record," Maya said quietly, "that this is the last time I agree to anything without reading the full brief first." Priya was already at the table, pulling the cassette player from her bag. The recordings contained interviews with doctors, nurses, janitors, and security personnel. At first, they sounded routine. Staff discussing maintenance issues, budget cuts, ordinary conversations. Then the pattern emerged. Every interview ended the same way. Without warning, the speaker's voice would change. Their tone would drop to a whisper, as though they had suddenly noticed someone standing nearby. And every person uttered the exact same sentence. "They've started counting." Then static. Daniel listened to 6 recordings, then 7, then 8. Every tape ended the same way. Different people, different years, different circumstances. Always the same final words. "They've started counting." "Who's counting?" James asked the room. Nobody had an answer. Near dawn, Daniel uncovered a collection of maintenance records hidden inside a locked administrative office. Most concerned repairs and schedules, but several reports had been sealed inside a separate folder. The records described a series of disappearances. Every incident occurred at exactly 12:07 a.m. Every victim was a staff member. Every disappearance happened within the same section of the hospital. Witnesses reported hearing footsteps, then finding abandoned shoes. Nothing else. No blood. No signs of resistance. No evidence that anyone had left the building. People simply ceased to exist. Again and again. For years. "We need to leave," Priya said. Her voice was flat. Final. 5 more minutes, Daniel said. Those 5 minutes cost him everything. The first to go was James. He had moved ahead to check the eastern stairwell. They heard nothing. No scream. No struggle. No sound at all. Just James walking into the darkness at the end of the corridor. And then the corridor was empty. Rick went in after him immediately, flashlight cutting through the black. Daniel was 2 steps behind. The stairwell was undisturbed. Dust on every surface, thick and untouched. No footprints going up. No footprints going down. No sign that James had ever set foot inside. But there was one detail that Daniel would never include in any cut of the film. James's flashlight was on the floor at the base of the stairs, still switched on, still lit, as though it had been placed there carefully, set down by someone with steady hands, someone taking their time. "James!" Rick shouted into the stairwell. The echo returned clean and empty. Maya had the camera running. The footage shows Daniel and Rick standing at the stairwell entrance. It shows Priya behind them, one hand pressed flat against the wall. It shows nothing else, because whatever took James moved through the building the same way the footsteps did. Without being seen, they found Maya's camera 40 minutes later, still recording, She had separated to get a wide-angle shot of the third-floor corridor. When Daniel reached her last known position, only the camera remained, propped against the baseboard, aimed down the hallway, still running. Daniel picked it up, reviewed the last 2 minutes of footage. The hallway was empty. Maya was there, visible on the far left edge of the frame, adjusting her lens. Then the footsteps began in the recording. Clear, close, just off camera. Maya turned toward the sound. She stared down the hallway for a long moment. Then she walked toward it, slowly, unhurried, as though she had been invited. She walked until the hallway's darkness swallowed her completely. The camera recorded 11 more minutes of empty corridor before Daniel picked it up. Rick was the last. He and Daniel had stayed together deliberately, backs against each other, moving through the ground floor toward the exit. They were close. The main doors were visible at the end of the corridor. 20 meters. 15. Then Rick stopped. "Do you hear that?" he said. Daniel heard nothing. "The footsteps," Rick said. His voice had changed. Something had drained out of it. "Rick," Daniel said, "don't count them." Rick didn't respond. His lips were moving. Daniel grabbed his arm. Rick turned and looked at him. His eyes were somewhere else entirely. Counting. His lips moved again. 1, 2, 3. "Rick, stop." 4, 5. "Rick, stop counting." 6, 7, 8. Rick's expression went blank. The counting stopped. He stood motionless for 3 full seconds. Then he smiled, just slightly, and walked back into the building. "Rick!" Daniel ran after him. The corridor swallowed Rick whole before Daniel closed half the distance. He searched for 40 minutes. He found Rick's boots at the end of a hallway he had already walked 3 times, placed neatly side by side, facing the wall. Daniel ran. He found the exit. He escaped before sunrise. By the time investigators reached the hospital 6 hours later, they found 3 sets of shoes inside the building. Priya's trainers near the main stairwell. Maya's sneakers in the eastern corridor. Rick's boots against the wall. James left nothing. James had simply stopped existing inside the stairwell, and whatever process accomplished that had no need of leftovers. The search team swept the hospital for 9 days. No bodies. No blood. No indication that 4 human beings had passed through the building. Only the shoes. Only the silence. Only the footsteps, which 3 members of the search team reported hearing at various points during the sweep, and which none of them, under very clear and very direct instruction from the lead investigator, were permitted to count. 3 weeks later, Daniel began editing the documentary. Friends described him as exhausted, distracted, unable to sleep. He spent most of his time reviewing footage from the hospital, searching for details he might have missed. One night, while examining a recording from his first walkthrough, he noticed something unusual. A footprint, bare, fresh, peering in dust. He rewound the clip, played it again. Another footprint formed several feet behind the first. He searched other recordings. The same phenomenon appeared everywhere. Every supposedly empty hallway contained them, forming silently in the background, always advancing, always following. The farther he reviewed the footage, the worse it became. The footprints weren't random. They were tracking him. In every recording, in every corridor, in every room, slowly drawing closer. Daniel enlarged the images, frame by frame. The final sequence came from footage recorded shortly before dawn. The last visible footprint appeared directly behind where he had been standing, close enough to touch him. Then it stopped. Daniel stared at the screen. The room around him remained silent, until an audio file suddenly began playing through his computer speakers. He hadn't opened it. The file wasn't listed anywhere in the project. Yet the sound continued. static, a low hiss, then a whisper, clear, close, almost intimate. You counted. Daniel's face drained of color. The recording ended. The editing software closed itself. The monitor went black. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then a sound emerged from somewhere beyond the screen. A single footstep, slow, deliberate, followed by another, and another. The documentary was never completed. Investigators later recovered Daniel's computer. The unfinished project remained saved on the hard drive, along with one final recording. No video, no image, only audio. A series of footsteps moving through an empty hallway, followed by a second set, and a third, and a fourth, all walking at the same rhythm, the same interval, the same deliberate, measured pace, as though four people who no longer existed were walking together somewhere just beyond reach. The recording ends abruptly after the ninth footstep. What happens next is unknown, because every person who listens to the complete file reports the same thing. The footsteps begin again, somewhere nearby, slow, steady, and closer than before.